I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. I'm here with Ian Burns, managing editor from Ottawa. How you doing this morning, Ian?
I'm doing very swell. How are you doing, mate?
Well, we got a really big show, as always promised. It's our Friday edition, so this is our last show of the week, and this is our take two because the first one didn't go. Somehow you disappeared.
Can't get rid of me that easy.
Uh, Interesting. Holly Dome posted this, and 20 million views in 12 hours. Jordan Peterson interviews Pierre Poilievre, and that's a lot of views for a Canadian interview for a politician, and in such a short period of time.
Yeah, and that's a number of hours ago that she said that, and I don't know if because they post it on numerous platforms. I
Yeah.
don't know if she's just looking at X there, but yeah, I mean it's huge. It's a huge audience, isn't it? And this is always the case with Jordan Peterson, who is,
Uh-huh.
he's very big in America where he now lives.
But in another way, it's another tell that people are looking for change because I think that the Justin Trudeau did a podcast or something like that, and it got very few views. So
Well, yeah, I mean because I guess that's just seen as an establishment. Um, an establishment production almost, isn't it? And it's nice and safe and it's boring. Whereas Jordan Peterson is seen as an outsider. He's seen as a little bit kind of, I suppose, edgy, if you can use that word. So naturally, I think it's going to attract more
and he
interest.
might have got some views too because Elon Musk reposted it and said it was an excellent interview. So I mean, he has an audience of a couple hundred million. So give it a little
Yeah,
boost
that doesn't
there.
hurt.
A little boost,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I would recommend people to watch it. This is the kind of interview. Obviously, I wouldn't have expected that we'd ever get as much time as Jordan Peterson got, but this is the kind of interview that we've been trying to get with Pierre now for, is it 2 years, 18
Yeah.
months, something like that?
Yeah, something like that. Just where we're promised it, and then it just kind of like keeps getting kind of pushed off, right? So
Yeah, and it's interesting that Holly Dawn, she highlighted a, a, a a couple of sentences there from Pierre that I also, because I watched it on like super fast speed, which is very difficult to do because Polyev speaks super fast anyway. So I don't advise that. But I listened to it and that struck me, that line, because Jordan Peterson asked him like, what's it like when you go to Parliament, on a Monday morning or something like that? How do you arrange your day? And he said like one of the first things that happens is my team present me with like a summary of the news, and he mentions independent media, which as you know, that's the main topic we would like to speak with Polyev about because
yeah.
of how we are unfairly treated, shall we say? I think that's a pretty
Well,
objective statement.
to add to that, you're working on a story right now, a compilation of our numerous stories on Bill C-18, including interviews with some of the CP and CBC and Michael Geist and an academic media watcher out of Vancouver.
Yeah, but it seems a little bit cheeky of Polyev to mention that when we've been reaching out to him quite a
Hmm.
lot, and his team have used our content on a number of occasions on Twitter and elsewhere, and they've cited it when because he has quite a good press team, and they send out sort of like they send lines out to the press every day, and they cite the statistics that they send out, and they've used us for that. So it's obvious that we're on their little list, and that
Hmm.
Polyev therefore is informed by our content. But when we keep knocking on the door, I mean, we have it. In fairness, we have spoken to him a number of times,
Yeah,
but
we've done
our
several
request was
interviews with them.
specifically about C18,
Yeah,
and
we've
it
done
was
several interviews with them, and how many with our prime minister?
well, we managed to sneak into a press conference once, didn't we? After they tried to ignore us and not give us the address, and get a question in that he responded to at some length.
But he didn't respond to the actual question.
No, he stuck the knife into Meta.
Yeah.
That was about it.
So on the other side of the partnership there, Jagmeet Singh, former NDP staffs and campaign workers, mailed petition calling on Singh to actually vote down the Trudeau government. They're saying that this government is the worst government in Canadian history. That's coming from a bunch of NDP workers and NDP staffers and campaign workers.
Yeah, just to tie that in with the interview, they talk about Jagmeet Singh and the NDP quite a lot in that interview, and it was actually recorded based on what Poilievre says. It was recorded the day after Singh said that he was going to bring down the government, and he actually talks about that a lot, like whether or not he is actually going to do that. And Poilievre didn't seem to really believe him,
Yeah.
but it's not the first time that he's kind of hinted at it, but this is the first time that he's explicitly said, I believe it's the first time that he will absolutely
He,
bring the government down. So it's a different caliber of promise, I think, this
he's
time.
going to have a tough time to walk back his talk this last time for sure. Because the other one time
Yeah.
he left a kind of like a loophole in there for himself, but he was pretty solid on this one. So it's going to really show what his character is made of if he tries to walk back this one.
Yeah, I think if he did, it's very hard to imagine how he would do it. But if he did do that, you'd think that that would be the end of his time in politics. It would, I think that would be too much of a betrayal.
And then friend Mark Carney is getting really active out there on X and everywhere. He's starting to looks like he's kind of campaigning on his own, but a couple of blows for him though, because he heads up this banking group, this Net Zero Banking Alliance, and the banks are quitting. Morgan Stanley, Citi, Bank of America, all quitting the climate group. That like the when it was favorable with the Trudeau government, the Biden administration, and stuff like that. Now with the new administration coming in, they're all bailing on this. And the Globe and Mail did an article too. Major U.S. banks quitting Carney-led climate alliance ahead of Trump's return to office.
It's just a start. It's really like they're falling. They're falling like dominoes, aren't they? The DEI stuff, all the social media, they're all just trying to like. I think they've all put their finger to the wind, and they've realized that they've
Well,
got to.
the people have reacted to it and have had enough. So I guess now that like the major institutions are saying, well, we're going to go with where the people are. If you want to put up that other slide there, Rommel. Um, yeah. So and then even on top of that, another article it says 2025, the final year of Trudeau Liberals in the Canada's lost decade. And released just before Christmas, the bank report is just the latest assessment of Canada's failing economy compared to the U.S. The U.S. manufacturing sector grown by 10% in real terms since 2018. In stark contrast, Canada's manufacturing has shrunk 5% over the same period. I mean, they keep playing with the numbers, but the numbers really don't lie. And again, if anybody needs any real proof, look at our Canadian dollar. That is the stock chart of Canada itself, and we'll get to that later in the show.
And the all-important GDP per capita. I mean,
Yeah.
that lost decade. I associate that with Japan. I mean, I think it
Yeah.
was probably used before Japan's economic collapse, but or economic stagnation. But if you look at the data, that led people to say that Japan had had a lost decade. It's more like a lost couple of decades now, isn't it? But the
Mhm.
data is very, very similar to what we've had in Canada. Just stagnation, basically,
And
and decline in GDP per capita.
but the difference between us and Japan, though, too, is we sit on vast natural resources and we should be. Like, we are not anywhere near our potential. If you think of it as if I'm a hockey player, it's like, we're not living up to what we could do. We should be the superstar out there on the ice, and instead we're barely making the fourth line.
Yeah, and I mean, it's interesting that you say that, and that we're talking about Japan, because Japan is like famously um, j just has basically no natural resources. It's like it's
Mhm.
completely dependent on imports of most of the essentials of life. So yeah, it is an interesting comparison.
Including BC raw logs.
Yep.
There you go. Blacklocks, Holly Doan and the team over there doing great work always. And she just put out a piece there too that CBC wants more money, almost another $500 million, and they also want raises and bonuses.
Well, they do stellar work, don't they?
Was that sarcasm or what was that?
To be honest, I would say um, they do have some. They do put out some good articles. I'd say it's probably on average, it's probably about one good article every 2 days, I would say. And
I
those good articles are really, really good. And so
I really
we
do
should
like
commend
Andrew
them for that.
Chang. Andrew Chang does really good work with about that. I think he does really good work. But Yeah.
But they do. The funny thing is, they do a lot of things that they kind of have no business doing, like really, really sort of like press releases and stuff like that. I mean, that's not why you have a national broadcaster, and sort of funded by taxpayers' money. You're supposed to have that really so that they can produce content that nobody else can.
Right. Investigative
So
stuff.
yeah, like stuff that takes a lot of time and a lot of work and
Yeah.
requires the kind of heft of a government agency, which it is in effect.
Yeah. The Toronto mortgage delinquency rate hits another 9-year high. This is all again to do with the Canadian government policies and the Bank of Canada rates. And this thing is going to continue to get worse unless they get those mortgage rates down and, like our housing prices down.
Well, they're having a real problem in Toronto as well because condo prices have collapsed. So there
Yeah.
are a lot of people who are like leveraged to an extreme extent for a condo that they bought for like $900,000 or something, and then they try and sell it now, and the offers are coming in for like 550 and things like that. So
It's pretty clear where the pressure was because they cut back immigration and we're seeing rental um, vacancies rise and we're seeing prices drop. So because they cut the flow of immigration down, and then they blamed it on a whole bunch of other things, like blamed it on Airbnb and all kinds of other things, when clearly it was this basic supply and demand. It just basic economics. Too much demand, too little supply.
yeah, and it's worth mentioning that we were told, even though that's the most obvious rule in economics, we were told that that didn't really apply when it came
Right.
to that
That's what I'm saying.
particular phenomenon.
So you should not trust common sense and common math and just basic economics. You should trust just rhetoric.
That's been, in some ways, that sums up the last 10 years, really, and not just in economics, but in social issues and just everything, really. Don't trust what your eyes see, but instead listen to this person with a PhD explain why it's actually very different.
And here's an example. I pulled this because a lot of Elon Musk has even threatened maybe to start suing some of the outlets. This is an Associated Press uh, tweet, but if you go into the story, it tells more so the truth. But like their caption reads, um, "Breaking: Man who died in Tesla Cybertruck packed with explosives outside Trump Hotel was a U.S. Army soldier." It really doesn't like kind of like makes that seem like might have been a hero even that because it's a highly decorated army officer inside the Tesla Cybertruck packed with fireworks. I mean the person shot themselves before that detonated. I mean they're still working on all the reasoning behind it, and they say the two aren't connected, but it seems odd.
Yeah, well, it's the power of language, and language is so much more important, I think, than people might instinctively believe. And if
But the,
if you've got a spare 10 minutes or something like that, I would recommend you read George Orwell's essay, Politics in the English Language, which is just going to be relevant forever. I think it's just an all-time essay, and I think it applies to this story as it does to many others.
it's just we see this in even our national media. Like it seems like the captions and the headlines are fairly misleading, but when you go into them, they're like most of the facts are in there. But like there's one I called out on Global the other day too, where it said like Alberta uh, is taxing EVs when the rest of the world is incentivizing them, which is clearly a blatant lie, right? Because California does a tax on EVs for like registration fee, and so does 39 other states that have it proposed, and like, but to single out Alberta, like, what was the point of that?
Well, I think we could have a guess, couldn't we?
No,
But that's
exactly.
certainly one of the ways that language is manipulated. I think it's worse when it's actually in the body of the text, and they use, for example, like euphemisms to describe some sort of horrible thing. I mean, another thing that media are often called out on, and fairly, I think, is when they say, for example, in the New Orleans terror attack, where they'll say a truck killed people. It's like, was
Mm,
it was it an autonomous truck or something? They don't say
right.
the obvious, which is that there was somebody in command of that truck, and they are the killers, not the truck. That's just a bizarre, perverse use of language.
And then they kind of denied that it was a terrorist attack, even though they were taking pictures of an ISIS flag right at the scene right away.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean, and they obviously I'm sure they would have had access to that guy's phones and whatnot pretty rapidly. They must have had that information quite quickly, and they would have immediately seen that that sworn allegiance to ISIS or whatever he'd done.
Let's move on to markets. Gold again. It was up yesterday, down a little bit today, chopping around that $2,600 mark, and it's just chop, chop, chop. And but it does, like I said, as that band tightens there, it looks like that band is tightening there on a year and an annual chart there, and it looks like it does want to go higher. And again, it's likely due mostly to the geopolitical situation still going on in the world, and still some of the Western economies that just want to light their currency on fire and print more money. Bitcoin up today. Again, looking for that $100,000 mark. There was an inflow in the ETF on Bitcoin, so people probably trying to close off the year, capture some profits and that. So, um, I mean, this chart. I mean, the wind is in its sails, but there's a big jump there from the November election that looks like it needs to get filled a little bit too. So it could go down before it goes up. But it's like holding on to that line there in that 95 to $100,000 range right now. And then the sickest chart of all, we talked about it earlier, the Canadian dollar chart. And I got to go to Vegas next week. I'm going to be there for the whole week doing the CES. We're going to see if we can do this show from there, and I'm going to do some live streams from the CES as well. The Consumer Electronics Show, one of the biggest shows in the world. Pretty cool stuff. Going to be lots of AI stuff, lots of energy stuff. We're going to see if we can get you a lot of that content right there from the floor in Las Vegas. It's one of the biggest shows I've ever been to. I was there last year. But not good for people going to the United States if you want to buy a hamburger or anything.
No, not unless you're going to pay with gold or Bitcoin.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or just don't eat, right?
That would be better
Um,
for the environment, wouldn't it?
there you go. Um, in our AI segment, Apple to pay $95 million to settle a lawsuit claiming Siri voice assistant snooped on users. Imagine that. Um, I
Yeah,
find,
and allegedly used that information to sell, like sold it to advertisers who then used that information to, target uh, adverts.
I find Apple's AI to be definitely the dumb kid on the block. Like it's the
Haven't they merged it now with ChatGPT? I
yeah,
guess you have to have ChatGPT
it's
though.
like the most clunky version because I have it. I have the iPhone 16, and I do have Apple Intelligence, and I think it should be Apple lack of intelligence, and because you kind of have to get it to connect to ChatGPT, then it's kind of limits it. It's like it's like having a Ferrari there connected to it, but they took the engine out and then and the transmission, and then they're just like, look, there's a Ferrari in there. So
Something that I would say is cool though is when you like if you take a picture of a leaf or a mushroom or something like that, and
yeah.
it's sort of or an insect, and it like 9 times out of 10 it can tell you what that is.
Are you
That's
talking
kind of
about
cool. So I
Apple
guess
Intelligence or ChatGPT here?
no, that well, ChatGPT definitely does that and probably does it better. But I'm talking about just when you take a picture in the
Mm,
with the camera app in an iPhone,
there you
and then
go.
you press the little eye button. That's kind
Hmm.
of cool. I mean, I'm not sure that's AI per se,
I
but
haven't
it's a
tried
cool
that.
little
So
feature.
there you go. And then our liberal minister says that he doesn't want to sell out national security as he defends the SpaceX alternative because like Elon Musk said, like if you're looking for high-speed internet, like why wouldn't you use SpaceX and Starlink? And this is another one where they've invested in technologies that are nowhere close to the leading technologies. We've seen this over and over again. We talked about it yesterday with the battery plant that they, invested heavily into, and it's been a abysmal loss, except for the person that was one of the executives for the company. He did very well.
Yeah, a
Imagine
small
that.
number of beneficiaries. But he
Oh,
says, I mean, I think every Canadian would have sympathy with what he says, which is that, it's much better to have this kind of thing in-house rather than
mm.
bring it in from overseas, because that's a bit riskier, and obviously that can ultimately make the country poorer by doing that. But the thing is, he says here we have the chance to have one of the largest companies when it comes to satellite communication. I mean, the problem is that I don't think anybody believes him when he says that because
Well, I
there's not
can't.
really. Are
Yeah,
there examples where the government has sponsored a company recently and it's gone on to become one of the largest of its kind in the world? I mean, not
space
really.
SpaceX is so far ahead in Starlink. Like I think they have 8,000 satellites up there, and they also have the vehicle that can take the satellites up there. We don't have any vehicle that can take satellites up there.
Yeah, we would have to ask who would we'd have to ask the Russians, I guess,
Oh
or
no,
you
I
know.
mean there's I think Blue Origin out there that can do it. I mean they're doing some stuff too, but I don't know. Like it's not even close. Like there's first place SpaceX, and then there's like I don't, if you had a telescope, you'd have a tough time finding second place.
Yeah, they've really dominated that, haven't they? That particular area.
In our EV news, Rivian, big announcement. We can play this little video if we can. We can talk over it maybe. I don't know if that works there. Rommel can fight through, but Rivian with a big announcement there saying, like they delivered, I mean, it's a small comparison to what Tesla delivers, but they delivered, they produced 12,727 vehicles and delivered about 14,000. And so, I mean, the market really liking what Rivian's saying. They say their constraints are gone now too, and the stock popped quite a bit. Actually, the stock up dramatically this morning. I believe it was up over 20% the last time I looked, and I'll look right now, and it is currently up 21%, up $2.87. And those are US dollars too. So Rivian now trading at $16. Uh, not near its high yet. The year high, like a year high, is $20. So the stock is still. We got a chart there we can pull up. My next image there. Um, so Rivian, you can see there on the far right, still um, below its annual high. Rivian got a bunch of money from Volkswagen, but Volkswagen looks to be hurting really bad. They have some real big problems in Europe. I think they promised Rivian around $4 billion, but will they get it? Because Volkswagen having a tough time closing some plants and that too. Um, so interesting times.
Yeah. Are they would they be considered sort of in terms of EV only, would they be considered the number two in the US after Tesla?
In the United States, I think Ford sells way more than I think Ford is number two with the
But I
F-150.
mean in terms of companies that only produce EVs.
I don't know where Lucid's numbers are. Lucid is another all EV producer. I think, yeah, the three of them would be the only, I think, all EV producer. The other one went bankrupt. Um, but Ford
It's
definitely
definitely
putting out,
interesting though to see how they're going to differentiate themselves.
yeah, Ford definitely putting out more, selling more EVs. I think they had a record quarter just recently. The meme, you got the meme today. We haven't had a meme for a bit.
Courtesy of Elon Musk, actually, it was because he loves a good meme and he reposted that.
Ignorance of the law is no excuse. Also the law.
I mean, anybody that's had to get involved in anything legal for whatever reason, as I have, being a journalist, you have to, well, in England, you've got to pass exams on the law. So I had to study it, and it's kind of that is a very frustrating aspect of the law because it changes all the time. That's another thing that's not quite covered by this by this meme. So it could be the common understanding that one thing is legal, let's say, but it's changed over a short period. And then, I think it's quite natural to expect somebody who would have ignorance of the law in that situation. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's no defense. And that is kind of built into the English common law system that we use in much of the West and in Canada. And yeah, I don't know, is it really fair anymore? I think that sort of motto or that rule comes from a time when there weren't very many laws, but now there are just like an infinite number of laws. So I feel like ignorance almost is a defense now.
Yeah, as we add more bureaucrats want to add more regulations and laws, and like some of them even contradict each other.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Well, there's another sort of like phrase associated with the English legal system, which is everything that is not expressly forbidden is permitted, essentially. So the idea that you can basically do anything That's the presumption, is that like everything can be done unless there's a law that says you can't do it. But I feel like we're changing in that regard as well, and there's some really interesting developments actually in the legal system, and also like the loss of the presumption of innocence, which we saw with
Yeah.
the Me Too era. I think that kind of that's stuck now, hasn't it? There really is a presumption of guilt now, and it's kind of people get their name dragged through the press even though they've not been charged of anything.
Yeah. Uh, in our good news segment, you can, if you live in Kelowna, in central Okanagan here, you can put your skills to test at Kelowna's first annual puzzle competition. You do puzzles, you and the wife?
Uh, my wife is trying to conquer Rubik's Cube right now, so I guess that's a puzzle, isn't it?
There you go. I found it at the Rubik's Cube there. I could actually do the Rubik's Cube back in the day. There's a pattern, and
Yeah,
then
it's like an algorithm, isn't it, that you have to
yeah,
memorize.
once you figure out the pattern, it's super easy, right?
Well, she's trying to do it without um guidance. She's trying like she's not going to cheat. She's trying to figure out the code, so to speak,
Yeah.
like
There's a couple of small
just
tricks in
blind.
there for sure. I remember doing it. There's a couple of small things where you almost have to go backwards a bit to go forwards, right? And that's what
Yeah.
kind
Well,
of like gets people going, right? Because they don't realize you got to go backwards to go forwards, right? So
yeah, and I think it's quite demoralizing when you see those kids that do it in like
10 seconds
six
less.
seconds or something.
Oh, they definitely know the pattern because it is easy once you know the pattern. And it doesn't matter where it starts. Once you know the pattern, it's really easy to do. I can remember doing it too, like in, like not seconds like some of those kids, but like, probably under a minute for sure.
Wow.
Anyway, so if you like puzzles, there's something to do, and I know lots of young couples love to puzzle, so that's a good way to waste a lot of time. Because you can't. There's no good news with our World Juniors hockey team. They got knocked out.
Yeah. It's a tragedy, really, isn't it, that?
Then we lost really weird games, right? Like to like Latvia and you know maybe it goes all back to Justin Trudeau wishing them luck and blame everything on him. Now that's the way to do it, right? Blame everything
He's
on
an
him.
unlucky charm.
Well, unlucky for Canada maybe, but why not, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna try and do that Bill C. I don't know where you're at with it, but we're gonna put that together whether we do it this week or next week. But maybe we'll try to do it today. We'll see how it goes. And then we'll talk about the story because it is still wreaking havoc with media across Canada.
Yeah, and another one of something that I mentioned in Five Things there, but we haven't covered it in this show. But Nick Clegg, who was once the Deputy Prime Minister in the UK and went on to Meta, he was kind of involved in a lot of these decisions. We obviously tried to get an interview with him, and he didn't respond. But he's also stepped down from Meta in this kind of wave of change that's come with the election of Trump, and they're going to put in a Republican, an actual registered Republican
Well, I
that
think
worked with George W. Bush. So maybe things could change from the Meta
lots
side.
is going to change there because Zuckerberg wants to work with the Trump administration, and like he's a Mark really likes that UFC type fighting, right? So I mean, sure, he likes to hang out with Dana White and those guys now too, right?
Yeah, and he's just in general, it seems like I don't know if he's been on the ayahuasca or something like that, but he's changed fundamentally, it seems. Like even his look, he's grown his hair out and he's like
Yeah.
on a surfboard with the American flag last year, I think that was. Like he's become a bit of a different chap.
Uh, I don't know what Jack Dorsey's doing recently. I don't remember you seeing him the last couple of times. He looks like he had moved into some kind of like Amish cult or something like that. But
Yeah, I think he's much the same, isn't he? Probably living in some Peruvian hostel or something.
yeah, but he did support Elon Musk as well in the takeover of X and that. And he's put a lot of his money into Bitcoin, and he must be laughing it up right now.
Yeah, well, I guess he was already laughing. He already had a couple of billion, didn't he? But I think he's pretty safe.
There you go. Well, that's our show for today and for the week. And then next week, we're going to try and do this show from Vegas. So we'll see how it goes. And then also, we're going to do lots of live streams next week from Vegas and show you some of the coolest technology. That's the stuff that's coming. And with AI really playing a bigger role in a lot of the companies out there, I've been getting tons of invites to a lot of press conferences down there. Also going to attend the speech from Jensen Huang, and then also Linda Yaccarino is going to be speaking there. She's the CEO of X. So I'm going to try and take all that in and see if I can share some of that with our viewers.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe Musk will make a surprise appearance as well.
Don't think he'll be there, but you never know. And it is a pretty amazing show if you ever get a chance to go. It's pretty wild. With that said, remember to like and subscribe and follow and do all those things. We would appreciate that. And again, feedback is appreciated. And we thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news, we live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now.